Hello and welcome to This One Thing, a video daily devotional coming to you from First Presbyterian Church of Fort Lauderdale. My name is Nick Merchant. I'm one of the associate pastors here, and each day we're taking a look at one of the texts from the Revised Common Lectionary daily readings and pulling out one thing for you to consider. And today is Friday, and so we have officially made it through the very first week of This One Thing. Now, I continue to be sort of amazed at the effects, the ripple effects that this pandemic has and is having on our country. I have a friend who is an assistant football coach at a Division I school, and they of course have lost their spring practices. But what he shared is that they have also lost their ability to invest in the student athletes on a daily basis, one-on-one. And his greatest concern wasn't the loss of practice time, but rather his fear was that in being away from the program, that some of these student athletes might get themselves into trouble. His biggest fear was for the well-being and continued development of these young men, and as well for the school as a family system, because to a certain degree, whether fairly or unfairly, the students' actions represent the school as a university family. And I'm reminded that the same is true for us as Christians, that it's our responsibility to bear as Christ's representatives here. And I think that sometimes we can get so wrapped up in the peripheral stuff, in trying to worship the right way, or that is the wrong way to worship, or that determining that this group of people is in, or that this group of people is out, that we wind up misrepresenting our Christian family to the world. Today's text I think speaks to this a little bit, and we're in the Gospel of Mark still, and Mark chapter 9 and verses 2 through 13, and these verses 2 to 13 are this gospel event that's shrouded in a little bit of mystery. It's referred to as the Transfiguration, and in it Jesus takes three of the disciples, Peter, James, and John, up a mountain, and up the mountain, these disciples see Jesus transfigured or transformed. And Mark describes a little bit about what that looked like. Jesus's clothes become this dazzling white. And then the disciples see Jesus talking with these icons of the Jewish faith. He's talking with Elijah and with Moses up there. These three disciples, quite literally, have this mountaintop experience with Jesus. And then, as they're coming down the mountain, Jesus says this curious thing. Now, if you've been listening the last couple of days, or even more, if you've been clicking on the link and reading the full text for the day, Jesus's reply here, or what Jesus says, may not come as a surprise to you. You see, two days ago, Jesus heals a blind person in Mark 8, and after doing that, he says, "Don't tell anyone." And then in yesterday's text, Jesus reveals that he is the Messiah, and then he says, "Don't tell anyone." And so now Jesus takes these three disciples up the mountain. They have this incredible experience. And then Jesus says, "Don't tell anyone." But by the way, how badly would you have wanted to tell the other disciples that this has happened once you get back? And then Jesus says, no, you can't say anything. And so there's one key difference right here in verse 9, and I believe that it begins to reveal Jesus' reasoning for their silence. And so picking up here at chapter 9 and in verse 9, it says, as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Suddenly, for the first time, Jesus sets a parameter on their silence. Until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Jesus wants these disciples to understand the context of all that he has been doing before they begin sharing it with the world. You see, Jesus is preparing them to be his representatives in the world. And Jesus doesn't want them telling until they really have an understanding of his purpose. Because it was never going to be about mountaintop experiences. It was never going to be about just healing the blind, and it was never going to be about just becoming king. All of these would point to the one thing. It was always going to be about the risen Christ. It was always going to be about the restoration of all that God had created good. It was always going to be about raising that which was dead to life. I wonder, what do our lives say to the rest of the world about Christ's purpose? Do they proclaim the small things, those things on the periphery? How to worship or how not to worship, or who's in and who's not? Or do our lives proclaim the risen Christ? Do our lives proclaim that God is restoring all that was good? Will our lives proclaim a God who brings the dead to life? Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Monday.